first topic is the Hoppajet update from the crash at Naples. And I thought this was just going to be intel on the law enforcement side because I actually got some stuff that I want to talk about. But then
good
the
intel.
Then the NTSB released their preliminary report, and it's not. So here's what happened. So the NTSB released a report earlier from the crash. The aircraft was going from Ohio State University Airport in Columbus. You know where that is? That's where you're your neck of the woods, right?
I mean, yeah, it's Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. So it's a Bombardier's CL-600 operated by Ace Aviation Services doing business as Hoppajet. They were returning to Florida. They were serviced with 350 gallons of fuel. And I know a lot of the initial speculation talked about, was it Prist, whether they had done icing, de-icing, all that stuff in the fuel. But they don't talk about that here. But they do say they used the ADSB track. It was 6.5 miles north. And I want to watch the dual engine failure thing again because I'd like to sync up the comms here in a second. So once I finish reading this, we'll go through the comms. But they were 166 knots, and they cleared them to land on runway 23. They turned their base leg, which put them on a 5-mile final. And then they got the flight data recorders, and the flight data recorder said that about a minute and a half later, they got 3 master warnings recorded flagging a problem with oil pressure in the left engine. This was immediately followed by an oil warning from the right engine. Then the system alerted pilots to illumination of a master warning light on the glare shield, a corresponding red message on the crew alerting system page, and a triple chime voice advisory, engine oil. At 3:10, when the aircraft was approximately 1,000 feet MSL and slowed to 122 knots, the crew declared an emergency, notified ATC that it lost both engines. The aircraft was on a shallow intercept angle for final approach. ATC acknowledged the call, clearing the jet to land. Crew replied it was not going to make the runway. It was at an altitude of 900 feet and a ground speed of 115 knots. The ADSB showed them on I-75 in Naples. It was rush hour. Oh, wow. Rush hour on a Friday.
Wow.
A lot of cars. Dash cam submitted to the NTSB shows the final seconds. The left main touchdown, and then in the center of the 3 lanes, then right main touchdown in the right lane. The jet rolled through the breakaway barrier into the grass shoulder area before impacting concrete barrier. I know a lot of people said it had hit a car. It doesn't say that here, but that doesn't mean it didn't. And then obviously they caught it caught fire at that point. Flight crew included the captain, FO, and the cabin attendant. And we didn't talk about the cabin attendant. I didn't even know the cabin attendant, I think, when we first talked about this, but she did an amazing job. She saved those lives.
Yeah.
I mean, by far, just amazing.
Yeah.
So basically, she realized the cabin and emergency exits were blocked by fire, so she directed the passengers to the tail section of the airplane, and they evacuated through the baggage compartment door. Cabin attendant, the 2 passengers on board, and a motorist sustained minor injuries. Unfortunately, the pilot and first officer, the captain and first officer, did not survive. They were experienced 10,000 hours of flight time and 2,000 in the accident airplane for the captain. And the FO had 24,618 hours of experience, 138 in the accident airplane.
Wow.
So its most recent continuous airworthiness inspection on the engines was January 5th at 9,763 hours of operation. That's the airplane. It's powered by 2 GE CF-34 engines. Most of the aircraft was consumed by fire. It smelled of Jet A fuel, and the ground was soaked with it. I know a lot of people also speculated about running out of fuel.
Right.
The center cockpit center console was found separated from the main wreckage. Both the engine throttle levers were found near the idle stop position, which of course is consistent with you trying to land and stop. Flap selector was found in a position consistent with a 45-degree flap extension. Again, you're normal. Landing, you're configured. You're not going to deconfigure at 900 feet. You're just going to take what you got. Left wing was entirely consumed by post-impact fire. Evidence of right wing had impacted the vertical steel I-beam of a highway sign. The outer portion of the wing had been torn off. Right wing fuel boost pump was located. The left wing fuel boost pump was not. Tail section was largely intact, damaged. They noted the engines were still attached and approximately 16 ounces of liquid with an odor and appearance consistent with Jet A fuel was drained from the aft tail fuel tank. Sample contained about a ½ ounce of what appeared to be water. That's not a lot. I mean, that's not a lot of water.
No.
APU unit fuel filter bulb was removed for visual inspection of the fuel and filter. No debris was noted, and the drain fuel and the filter appeared clean. Fuel was retained for analysis. Engines were also removed for further examination. They did not find any structural anomalies on the right engine, and examination of the left engine, oil filter in good condition. No particles were observed in the pleats. Fuel samples were collected from various points throughout the system. It was noted the fuel from the fuel filter and heat exchanger displayed a yellowish tint, while the other fuel samples were clear. The odor of the samples was consistent with Jet A. In addition, the main fuel inlet port exhibited a small yellow-colored debris particle. The oil filter appeared in good condition, no particles. So it's interesting, right? You get oil indications is the first thing you get.
Yeah, it didn't say like what kind of oil, right? I mean, if it's like low oil pressure, that's both engines shutting down, right? If it's high temperature, that could be an issue. I guess where I'm going with this, it's extremely, extremely rare for modern airplanes to lose both engines.
Both engines, right? Both. That's why initially everybody thinks, well, it's a fuel problem, right? Because
but the fire on when it landed, the explosion, that's fuel,
right? But so what's the yellowish tint? Like, what are they? Like, they got a little bit of water, but what's the other stuff? Is it what was it some issue with icing or some contamination of the fuel?
Some of the people in the chat, and they may be onto something. We're speculating now, but if you remember the British Air 777 that basically the engines didn't flame out, I just don't think they responded, and they ended up crashing it just short of the runway. What the deal there was within the fuel filters, the fuel had like partially frozen or gelled in the filters because of the extreme they were at high altitude for a while.
Yeah.
And some people are speculating maybe it was something along those lines, but I'm with you, Mover. It's very modern jet airplanes with two engines. It's extremely, now granted, it's happened in the A320 like twice because of the FADEC. I don't like birds, but there's no birds in this one.
Maybe. I mean, they haven't found any, this is preliminary. So at this point, the other thing I think people had speculated was when the captain, he goes to get the flaps, he might've hit the cutoff. Based on maybe, would your first indication for an engine shutdown be an engine oil warning? I don't know about that aircraft. It doesn't sound consistent with that, but that's, again, that's why we wait until they finish their report. But so it's some interesting stuff we found out. And I want to draw attention, and I talked about this last time. I want to draw attention to the Shadow 5. That was the helicopter that happened to be in the area that did some on-scene stuff. And I got an email or a message from one of the pilots that was there that day. And we don't usually, you never really think about the rescue folks that show up and try to help. But I want to play the audio real quick, and then I want to read what he said to me and just kind of give credit to what they did, because they still were right there and doing a good job. So here's the audio one more time. We've played this last time.
Okay, Challenger, Hopperjet 823, lost both engines, emergency. I'm making an emergency landing.
Whoever's got the emergency, clear to land runway 23. Is that Hopperjet 823?
We're clear to land, but we're not going to make the runway. We've lost both engines.
Drop Westjet 574 to hold short.
Tower Shadow 5, where's that? Shadow 5, there are two northwest right over I-75. Hopperjet 823.
Everybody stand by. There's an alert 3 in progress. Everybody stand by.
Tower Shadow 5 rescue helicopter, request to go to the scene.
Shadow 5, proceed direct as requested.
Okay. So I wanted to read this. So the crew of Shadow 5, the Collier County Sheriff's Office, they were getting ready to do SAR search and rescue hoist training. We had just started, so they were sitting on the pad at Naples with a full crew. sheriff's pilot, sheriff co-pilot, sheriff crew chief, and 2 North Collier Fire Department firefighters, paramedics. So you already have some highly trained people in the area. He said he heard him make the initial call. He had the crew get in and they went to work. 90-second flight to the scene. And you heard that just now where, he's listening. They're on the ground, sitting there waiting, and he goes, "Hey, where is he?" Because he knew things were going to get bad. Said he immediately recognized it was not going to be a hoist. Quarter-mile debris field with heavy fire, traffic still flowing both directions. Remember, it's rush hour traffic. Around the crash site in the southbound lanes. Landed in the northbound lanes, dropped off the medics to start triage. Our medics were on scene for several minutes by themselves, gathering as much information as possible for the other responding fire departments and EMS. As soon as those guys were out, he took back off with his co-pilot, is handling the scene for law enforcement. So remember, he's flying, and in the other seat, they're actually talking on police radios, like we talked about with Daniel, advising where it was and what needs to happen, such as shutting down on and off ramps, painting the big picture for responding units to prepare for a mass casualty incident, eventually the on-scene ground commander, and secure the scene. Once we gave as much info as possible and other firefighting departments arrived, I landed the helicopter in the southbound lane, south of the crash, far right lane, to leave access for responding units. My thought process was that we normally take crashes that happen off airport property within the county. At this point, was of little value in the air. So I divided myself, my co-pilot, crew chief to check vehicles involved, get names, plates, all the info we could for the report. Eventually, we were told Florida Highway Patrol will handle the report. They were relieved that we had already gathered a majority of the information needed for them. Flight attendant and passengers got out as we were dropping off medics. I assumed they were good Sams checking the airplane. We later found out they were the passengers. Talking about working under pressure, 2 pilots did the best they could to minimize the impact on others, but the flight attendant surviving the crash and having the ability to get her packs out of the cargo door with literally seconds left before the fire consumed the fuselage needs to be celebrated 10 to 15 seconds longer, and they wouldn't have made it. Somber day, but as you know, we get paid to do a very specific job helping others. It's easy to get sucked into the moment and vapor lock on certain things, but crew resource management and talking to each other can help break that chain of bad decisions to get the best outcome possible. As far as scene management for the entirety, the agencies down there handled it very well. So when I got that message, it sent chills up, because we talked
crazy.
We talked about this, and it's that whole be ready, because you don't know when the call is going to come. You don't know when it's going to happen, and it's going to be your time to do the work. Now, unfortunately, they weren't able to save the pilots, but they were right there to help the passengers who had luckily gotten out.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, you just never know, right? That's why in any, in the military or in law enforcement, rescue, or anything like that, that's the whole mantra. You train like you fight, because you never know.
Yeah.
It's very rare that something planned comes along and you're able to execute. It's usually just a surprise, like it was for you. But if you're trained and ready, you read through that, it almost sounds like he wasn't surprised. He just knew what to do, right?
Not only was he not surprised, but he had the situational awareness, because sometimes the risk is always, you're sitting on the ramp, you kind of dropped your pack, you're waiting for everybody to load up, you're not really interested. And he was listening. He was listening on the radio, got the information needed, immediately keyed up when it was appropriate, not jamming up the frequency, but immediately keyed up like, hey, send me in, I'm ready. And I'm sure it helped the situation, especially being able to coordinate all the other units, coordinate the shutdown of the interstates, getting on and off ramp shut down. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it that people don't realize logistically. And the fact that, we're only talking about, it's unfortunate we lost 2 lives, but good Lord, rush hour on a Friday could have been so much worse.
I mean, like we, in the fighter world, we'd always brief like, first person to the scene's the on-scene commander. But, in this case, dealing with rush hour traffic.
Oh yeah.
An airplane, crashing just past the field, but obviously the field, the tower knew what had happened. I mean, there's a lot of really non-standard dynamic stuff going on there, and they really,
yeah.
I mean, kudos, man. That's outstanding.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, moving on from that, we've got one. Actually, we're going to save this one for your later topic. We have some relevant chats. Jason says left wing hit top of a pickup truck, crushed the cab, but minor injury there. I'm people in Naples and really appreciate your show. So awesome.
Thanks, man.
So they did hit one of the vehicles. I remember that. But I think it sounds like what caused it to actually spin around was hitting like structural stuff from the interstate. So I don't think a truck would be enough to for something that massive.
Rush hour, you're trying to land a jet in rush hour traffic, you're going to hit something.
Yeah.
You know,
luckily, minor injuries. I mean, that would have been fatal.
Right.
And Justin says the first master caution that appears in a Challenger when engine shut down is oil pressure. So, I mean, maybe
engine just rolling back.
Maybe it goes back to that other theory of the inadvertent shutdown. I don't know. That's what investigators are going to figure out. Obviously, there's enough time to put them back and hope that they spool up, so they wouldn't still be in that position.
Maybe,
post crash.
Yeah,
you're right. You don't know. So, okay, moving on from.